My name is Andreas Schleicher.
Is that better?
And I run OECD's global comparisons of education around the world, best known through our PISA program, but we are doing lots of other interesting things, trying to help people develop the right skills, helping them use those skills well, and to make sure that skills translate into better jobs and better lives.
I'm Roger Schank. I was a professor of computer science and psychology most of my life at Stanford, Yale, and Northwestern. At a relatively young age, I quit because I think the system is corrupt to become a full-time education revolutionary. I support myself by developing new kinds of learn-by-doing curricula for companies that are smart enough to realize they need them. And for schools, not so much, because schools are completely controlled by the testing industry.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. Thank you, Roger.
In the last years, can I have my slides, please? If there's one thing that we have learned over the last really tough economic years, it's that you cannot simply bail yourself out of an economic crisis. You cannot just stimulate your way out of a crisis. You cannot print money your way out of a crisis. We've tried all of those things. But we can do so much better to give people better skills, more people better skills to collaborate, compete and connect in ways that drive our economies forward. We've tried to actually look at this, and when you look at people at the high end of the skill spectrum, you can see they're twice as likely to be in employment. They're 3 times as likely to earn a good wage. I mean, skills are the key driver of inequalities in much of our societies. But it doesn't end with money. We can see a strong relationship between the skills that people have and the health they have, their propensity to volunteer. People at the high end of the skill spectrum see themselves as actors of political process. People at the bottom end see themselves as objects. Even trust in our societies is a close function of the skills that we have. But at the very same time, I think everybody knows that this is not about degrees and qualifications. We know very well that there is this toxic mix on the one end of, on the graduates getting out of universities, having a hard time finding a job, and at the very same time, employers saying they cannot find the people with the skills they need. There's something going wrong in our economies and sort of the skills we provide people and what is actually needed. We need to think about this much more holistically, putting a lot more responsibility on individuals, to have the capacity and the motivation to build their skills throughout their lives. And it's about developing the right skills. It's about making sure people get a chance to use them. And finally, putting skills to effective use. And I want to talk through some of those things in a little bit more detail. The hardest part for all of us is to anticipate how the world is changing. In a way, you need to decide what you learn today, to be prepared for jobs that have not been created, to use technologies that have not been invented, to be ready for social problems we don't know will ever exist. A couple of years, The Economist brought out this cover story, predicting that about half of the jobs that we know today can be done by today's technology if we would just allow technologies to be deployed effectively. And this is not just about robots taking over whole factories. That's actually the easy part of it. Or having, a car without a driver going through the dense traffic of Berlin, That's sort of the surface of it. Think about augmented reality. We can now bring the world's most advanced knowledge in real time into anything we do, and that means the world no longer rewards us just for what we know. Google knows everything. The world rewards us for what we can do with what we know. That becomes a huge differentiator, and there's a lot more to come. I don't want to lead you through this, but there's a huge challenge for us to anticipate the changes that we are seeing. And the answer is that there is no longer a digital economy. The digital economy is the economy. One of the things that people talk about a lot these days is declining levels of productivity. If you look over time, the dark blue bar has shrunk. We're no longer seeing the level of economic growth that we used to see. But it's not because people have become lazy. Actually, people work harder these days than they worked in the decade before. That's the light blue bar. It's because we're seeing declining levels of productivity. But this is not so simple, actually. If you look a little bit in more depth into this, actually, if you are in a frontier firm, in one of those high-tech firms, you're actually rising in productivity. Those people make more and more money per worker. But if you are not following this trends, if you're basically in the kind of traditional sector of the economies, that's where we are seeing declining levels of productivity. It's true in the manufacturing sector, true in the services, true everywhere. There is this growing divide. Never before had the people with the right skills the life chances they have today. Never before. Even despite the financial crisis, all of that. But never before have people who do not make the grade paid the kind of price they pay today. At the level of individuals, at the level of companies, at the level of countries. No. Some people have called this a race between technology and education. No. Before the Industrial Revolution, neither technology nor education made a real difference for the vast majority of people. No. But in the Industrial Revolution, technology raced ahead of the skills of people. No. Today we look at the marvels of the Industrial Revolution. You wouldn't have wanted to live in those times because most people were left by the wayside. No. But, you know, we responded to this. We created the kind of public schooling that we still have today, the schooling that was equipping people for the norms of the industrial economy, and actually that generated generations of prosperity. But today we see exactly that same picture again. Technology racing ahead of the skills of people, and we're seeing growing social pain. That is that kind of mismatch that we see between the skills that people have and what actually creates value in our economies. This is the challenge of our times. And if we want to avoid that lots of people are left behind, we need to get people to think for their own and to develop their own skills at any stage in their lives. Let's see how well people are equipped. One of the things that we did is recently we tested digital problem-solving skills. Now, how well are people equipped to solve basic everyday problems using technology? You know, finding something on the web, doing an airport check-in, whatever. And when we did this for people in the age group 55 to 65 years old, no, we found that actually, apart from the United States and New Zealand, there is not more than 1 in 5 workers who is equipped for the flat world that we have today. That is the reality. Those are the people who voted for certain parties or for certain disintegration processes. No? Less than 1 in 5, except for the United States and New Zealand. Now you tell me, well, that's all a generational problem. Those people are all going to disappear, and the young generation is really well equipped for the digital world. No? But look at the 16 to 24-year-olds. Yes, it looks better, the bars are longer, but you're still talking only about half of the young people who are reasonably equipped for the world that we have today. I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about the world today. Every second young person you meet out on the street is just not ready for this. But we can also see that those things have changed. You know, look at the United States. Number 1 or number 2 in the old generation, not that great in the young generation. Not because things go worse, but because so many other countries have moved faster. You look at Korea or Singapore. Now, the old generation, very badly equipped. The young generation, very much ahead. And as always in life, you know, Germany you find somewhere in the middle. But huge interdirectional huge differences in the capacity of systems to adapt to a changing world in a young generation. In some countries, the young people moving into the labor market are not much better equipped than those getting out of retirement. In other countries, things are changing. But overall, lots of people being left aside. The education systems doesn't equip them for the kind of technology-rich world that we have today. Why is this important? Because the only area where we're seeing employment growth is for people at the high end of the skill distribution. And this chart is a bit surprising because if you have very poor skills, you have actually seen quite stable employment. Our economies are quite good in keeping jobs for people with very low skills. They pay you less and less, that's another story, but those jobs are stable. The people who are suffering are those with the middle range of skills, the average skilled person. Those are the kind of jobs that actually make us most vulnerable. The kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, are precisely the kind of things that are easy to digitize, automate, outsource. That's the reality today. So what skills are important? Of course, knowledge is always at the center. I don't want to diminish the value of knowledge, but we need to think much harder about the integration of different fields of knowledge. If you are able to think like a scientist, and at the same time think like a philosopher, and at the very same time think like an historian, you can look at problems from different perspectives. You'll be great. You'll be able to connect the dots where the next innovation is going to come from. If you are siloed in your single discipline, you're not going to be equipped for tomorrow's world. It's a lot to do with systems thinking. And actually in education, we're very good in taking big problems, breaking them down into smaller and smaller ones, and then teaching people how to solve those small problems. But the world rewards you exactly for the opposite. The world rewards you for actually making the connections, thinking in terms of systems, design thinking. Innovation today is no longer about you having a great idea and doing it. It's about you being able to collaborate with other people. Design is a very systematic process, not just about creativity. Information literacy, and we all suffer from the same thing. How do we find ourselves through this kind of world in which we live? Digital literacy, global literacy. Look at Europe. How difficult it is for us to work with people, to live with people who think differently from us, work differently from us. But that's, if you look through all phases of history, when have economies thrived? When they were able to integrate different perspectives, different cultures, different ideas. How hard has this become? That's what I mean when I talk about knowledge. I want to talk a bit about skills as well. Clearly, what matters today are things like creativity, critical thinking, putting into question the established wisdom of our times. Now, if you're really good at that, you're going to be successful. Solving complex, unstructured problems. Social skills. Communication. Very, very important dimensions. But I want to put something additionally on the map that is more controversial, harder to talk about, harder to measure, but really, really important. We call them character qualities. These are things like empathy. Being able to see yourself through somebody else's perspective, seeing somebody else's perspective, resilience, trying again when you fail, figuring out problems when you can't see the solution, mindfulness, being aware of yourself, aware of others, curiosity. One of the things, when we look in PISA, what we always see is that young children at the age of 10, 11, they are enthusiastic about science. They really love science. The older they become, the longer they go to school, the more they hate those kinds of school subjects. They may still do well because they know they have to, but they're no longer owning their learning. And that's what we're talking about. Very important. Curiosity, ethics, making judgments. In the past, when you didn't know the answer to a problem, you look it up in an encyclopedia and you can trust the answer to be true. Today, you go on Google or Weibo and you find 27,000 answers, and nobody's going to tell you what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's not true. You have to find out. That's the difference that we have. Self-awareness. If we talk about owning their learning, owning your learning, you have to have the right learning strategies, the right metacognitive strategies. If you do not develop them, no MOOC in the world is going to help you. That's why we have this terrible completion rate of most online learnings, because people haven't mastered the fundamental learning strategies. Very, very important. So those are the kind of dimensions we need to think much harder when we talk about owning the learning. And of course, we need to improve quality and equity of learning, making sure that all young people have a chance to develop those kinds of skills. Lifelong learning is very, very important, but we also know that almost anything that we do later in life reinforces what happened to us when we were young. Lifelong learning tends to actually reinforce social disparities, not moderate them. Very, very important. And think about how in science the world has changed over the last 10 years alone. In 2006, we didn't have the iPhone. We didn't have Google Maps, navigating. We didn't have, self-driverless cars. We have basically developed digital printing, 3D printing. All of those technologies have come to us in a very recent time, preparing people for tomorrow's world. That's really the key, and it's not going to be about teaching people something. Now, that's what we used to do, giving people a map to find their place in society. Today, the key is about you having the compass and the navigation skills to find your own ways to an increasingly volatile, complex, and digital world. These are the challenge today. How well do we do? Think about something that is absolutely fundamental for success in life. We all hate mathematics in some ways, but we know that numeracy skills are a very powerful predictor for many aspects of success in people. Look at this data. Even in a country like the United States, you have about 30%, almost 1/3 of people, young people, who just even don't know the most basic concepts. I'm not talking about, mathematical formulas, equations, but to think mathematically, to model and hypothesis. Huge numbers of people being left out of this. Why do I talk about it? Because those are the kind of people that end up precisely in the kind of routine jobs that we are going to see to disappear. No? There's a direct relationship between the level of skills you have on those foundations and the type of work that you're likely to end up with. No? Not preparing people where it's a huge thing. Fostering lifelong skills-oriented learning instead of stacking up qualifications up front in your life. No? Very, very important. The link between degrees and qualifications and the skills of people is actually amazingly weak. No? Here we did two things. We counted the degrees that people have got, and we directly look at the skills they have. And you can see it's all over the place. No? You can basically see a Japanese high school graduate has higher levels of skills than an Italian or Spanish college graduate. Huge differences. The kind of signaling that we have are not very good. That's why we need to talk much more about lifelong learning. This is the most depressing chart that I'm going to show you. On the vertical axis, you see the skills of people. And on the horizontal axis, you see the age of people. And you'll find out why this is so depressing is when you figure out where you are on this chart. We are doing really well in filling young people up with lots of knowledge and skills. But actually, when people need those skills most, when the world is changing, when you need to adapt to the next job, when you need to create your next job, that is where our systems, where people do not have the opportunities, the capacity, the motivation to continue learning throughout life. We need to do a lot better on this, yes. Integrating the world of work and the world of learning. We think about learning, as something that has to do with school. But actually our data show that the relationship is very, very different. The red line talks about the skills of people who are in school or university. No? And you can see the line goes upwards. If you're in school and university, you actually do learn something. No? I'm not questioning that. But if you are in the green line, you're combining education and work. You start out lower because that's not people's first choice. Everybody wants to go to college. No? But actually, you can see you end up pretty much at the same point. The place of work is an amazing opportunity to learning if we invest in the people. Even the people who are just in work, that's the brown line, they keep growing their talent. Very important. The only people who are in trouble are the people who are not in education and not in work. They actually go south. They end up worse than where they started. That's why the issue of long-term unemployment in Europe is such a huge issue for us. So that's basically what it means to develop the right skills. I'm not going to talk about the dimension of making sure that people get a chance to use them. This is the terrible story of Europe these days, that we have lots of talented people and we're not providing them with the opportunities to use their skills because we have these siloed and rigid labor markets that prevent people from deploying their skills. But it's another story. I just want to very briefly touch on the last pillar, and that's about skill match, making sure that people have the right skills. When you look at formal qualifications, it looks as if lots of people are overqualified. No? They have better qualifications than what they actually need. And we talk a lot about this, Have we invested too much in our skills? No? When you look at the skills of people directly, it looks very, very different. There's virtually no country in the industrial world that has more than 10% of people who have better skills than what they need for their work today. That is, we are not equipping people for the world of tomorrow. We run a very thin surplus layer of actual skills. We have lots of people with degrees and qualifications, very nice, but we have very, very thin on skills in the industrialized world. No? Very important. And why does it matter? That's going to be my last point. If you have the right skills and you have a job that is very demanding, you start out with a great salary and you're going to continue earning in your life. That's great. Now, that's what we call a high skill match situation. If you have less of skills than what you need in your job, it's actually good for you. You earn a little bit less because your employer is not going to pay you for skills that you don't have. But you continue to grow in your earnings. You can continue to grow and to develop. You are going to invest in your own skills. You develop. You will own your learning. But if you have a skills surplus, no, you do better than what you need at your workplace. It's going the other way around. And again, in our labor markets, we're often very, very good to protect the kind of jobs that keep people locked up in situations where they don't use their skills well. And nobody likes to close a car factory. No? And that is the dilemma that we have. And I'm not going to talk about the low skill match situation. I'm going to leave it here. I think there's a lot that we can do to equip more people with better skills, with the right skills, and translate those skills into better jobs and better lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. People in trouble are not in education and not in work. Lots of talented people not being able to use their skills. And when you think about the political context of what's happening now, I mean, you represent the developed countries of the OECD. There's a question here from Peter Isaacson, which really encapsulates a significant element of what's coming up and what's being confirmed, if you like, by the election in the United States, but also by Brexit in the UK and maybe in Italy coming up in the next few days, plus what's happening in Hungary and Austria and so on. From Peter Isaacson, learning cannot be divorced from culture and politics. Reform should be focused on all three. Can we do it?
Yeah, you know, the question is really what's cause and effect. I don't think the world is any more divided between, you know, political left or political right. The world, the fault line is now between those who benefit from the value of integration, from diversity, and those who pay the concentrated cost of this. And those who pay the costs are those who are poorly skilled. I think if we take a view that is sufficiently strategic, we can do that. And there are countries in this world that have become very good at that. You know, I don't think Europe is at the front here, but if you look to the whole of Europe, but if you look to countries like Finland, Sweden, Denmark, they are equipping people for their jobs. And they basically know that we will not expect people to accept that they lose their job if they don't feel they are prepared for the next job.
But do you think political leaders are prepared to confront the reality being exposed by your data and what we're seeing in the referendums and other political events?
I think if you go to the north of Europe, you clearly see this. If you go to East Asia, absolutely, you know, countries like Vietnam, like China have figured it out long ago. But I think the north of Europe is a good example. Canada is a great example as well. I think some do, but those who don't will pay a big price because the minority of people who are going to be left out, you know, we have a British Brexit, we have an American Brexit. We're going to see lots of these things if we are not, you know, doing better on this. I'm optimistic. You know, if you look to countries like Korea, in the 1960s, Korea had the level of economic development of Afghanistan today. One of the least developed skilled systems. Today it's at the front, you know, it has a sort of high-tech industry. It is possible to make those kinds of changes.
Let me embrace a few questions here which can be summarized as, can what you're suggesting be delivered at the speed the public expect when you compare it to the expectations within the political space? And I'm thinking obviously about the new president-elect of the United States, but other countries as well, where the politicians are expected to deliver, but education takes time.
Absolutely. You know, what we do in early childhood education is going to be an investment 15 years down the road. But I absolutely think that, you know, we do not have any other choice. We will otherwise run into a growing gap between the skills people have and what our economies need. Can we do it? We cannot do it if we just focus on, you know, institutionalized education. That is part of the solution. I think schools, universities have a very, very important place, but we need to invest in people. You know, we need to invest in the people who are working now, giving them the digital tools to manage their own learning, to advance their learning, develop their skills. If we're not doing this, we may well equip the next generation, but we leave all of those people who are out there earning their salaries in the cold. So that's basically the big shift that we have to go through from, you know, putting a lot of effort into early education towards making lifelong learning a reality to all. And that is only the digital world has given us the tools to do that. That's the big difference from where we were 10 years ago.
All right, Andreas, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Good. Just to remind you that we've got about 35, 40 minutes to run. We'll run a bit later. While Roger's speaking, we can hear Roger comments from the floor, and I'll bring those to you afterwards. Roger, the floor is yours.
I need my slides. Okay. So I was asked to answer the question, who owns learning? Not you, baby. It's not even about you. It's about everybody but you. Singers know who owns learning.
I wasn't taught how to pay tax. mathematics. But I know loads about Shakespeare's classics. I was never taught how to vote. They devoted that time to defining isotopes. I wasn't taught how to look after my health. But mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Never spent a lesson on current events. Instead I studied the old American West. I was never
Or everything you learn in school is completely and utterly useless to your real life. Math hatred is big. More singers.
Is this X defined? Is F continuous? How do you find out? You can use the limit process. Approach from both sides, the left and the right, and meet. I've just done.
If I had more time, I'd let you see the whole song because it's pretty funny. Okay, who owns learning? Harvard. Pick your favorite country and your university, same thing. How do they own it? You'll take 4 years of a foreign language. You'll study mathematics for 4 years. You'll do this, you'll do that. You mean I can't just learn what I feel like learning? No, or you're not getting into Harvard. Does it matter about Harvard? Yes, because all 3,000 colleges in the United States have exactly the same requirement. Harvard is leading the pack. Oxford, Cambridge, same deal. I'm an advisor to a Pakistani school system. I met with the parents to try to understand how we could build something different. The only question they had, it was, will you get our kids into Oxford or Cambridge? Thank you. As long as that's the game, learning is about becoming something that doesn't even exist anymore. The intellectual who doesn't need a job. Harvard in 1892, these are the subjects that were taught. Look familiar? Because the president of Harvard in 1892 wrote down the United States curriculum, high school, which is still in place today. Harvard, it turns out, has got 150 subjects now, but we're still doing what Harvard did in 1892. And we have testing, so much so that kids are taught to get excited by tests by singing about it.
What does the test say? Get your number 2 pencils out. Your number 2 pencils out. Get your number 2 pencils out. What the test say?
So, eliminate all testing would be a good place to start. Why? Because when you test things, you're testing meaningless facts that you won't remember ever again. I walked up to the president of the College Board, who runs the SAT test in the United States, and I said, tell me the quadratic formula. He said, I don't know it. I said, you're requiring every child in the world to know it, which they'll memorize for 5 minutes, forget it, never use the rest of your life, and that's your idea of education. To which he said, well, it's good for you math guys. Well, me math guy forgot it too, because I never used it. Number one person who owns learning, politicians. This is from a little piece of an American TV show.
Don't tell us that the only way to teach a child is to spend too much of a year preparing him to fill out a few bubbles in a standardized test. We know that's not true.
Wow, that man knew how to pander to teachers.
Higher standards are the right goal. Accountability is the right goal.
That took 3 years. On the campaign trail, he literally quoted me and said, the only 3 things that matter in education are human relations, communications, and reasoning. He said those words, and now he has made the testing system even worse in the United States. So all kids do all day long is get to take tests, and the teachers get fired if the test scores don't get high. And as a result of that, the kids who are the smartest kids, their teachers are getting fired all the time because their teachers are not raising their test scores. Right, this is true in corporations too. My company builds corporate training. We built a course in project management, which was useful for our corporations. Then we tried to launch it out in the world, and we're told, no, you have to pass the project management test that's administered by the company, whoever company it is, and you're not passing that test because they have to memorize a lot of words. We don't care if they know how to manage a project. We want to know if they memorize the right words. Want to see what those words are? I'm sorry. This is not education. This is nonsense. Also, the state. This particular state, I happen to live in Florida. So these are the questions to qualify to be a math teacher in the state of Florida. I suspect that all of you could qualify to be math teachers in the state of Florida. Notice they're not about teaching. We don't have any questions. What do you do with a kid? You really don't have that. Just, can you do some simple math? I'm not the first to say these things. Immanuel Kant said all knowledge begins with experience, not with being told blah, blah, blah. And here I am lecturing to you, which I totally and completely don't believe in. And the reason we do it is the same reason I'm doing it now. which is it is very difficult to have the one-on-one conversation with each of you that I would like to have. Okay, and that's in this situation. That's not true in school in theory, and in practice it is not true in PhD programs, where a professor takes on enough students that he can talk to them individually. That's the only part of the school system that isn't broken. This stuff is just about money. Let's make sure we can save a lot of money and have 1,000 people in the room and one person talking. And then they invented MOOCs. Gee, let's say we did something technological by putting these stupid lectures online. Wow. What's the role of technology? To enable us to build simulated experiences. I'm not the first one that came up with this. The U.S. Defense Department, which turned out to be a leader in education for a variety of reasons, built the air flight simulator back in the 50s, so that when you get on a plane and your pilot is flying for the first time, there's going to be one of those, you were on such a plane, but he's flown an exact replica simulation for 1,000 hours so he's ready to do it. And I would like to have simulations of anything you might ever want to do be available to anyone who wants to try them. And you want to also have some mentor available. That is my daughter. Her name is Hannah. She doesn't look like that anymore. But she was that age. She ran upstairs one day and she said to me, I'm having a problem and I need your help. I answered whatever it was, I don't remember. And then I wrote down what she said next. I'll be back when I need you again. She was self-directed learning. I don't know what she was learning. She was learning what she wanted to learn. She was doing what she was wanting to do, and she couldn't do it. Is she back when she needs me again? Yes. Today she's 44 years old, and I got a call last week after the election, because she works for the United States Digital Service, and she was in tears because she was sure Donald Trump was going to disband the service and not want to do what she's wanting to do. And I said, and how would you know that? And also, I don't appreciate this American Brexit. We've elected a new president. Name me a good American president, because I don't remember one. John F. Kennedy, we all love him. He started the Vietnam War and he invaded Cuba. Yeah, my kind of guy. I mean, really, you're worried about Donald Trump? He'll be like every other Republican, trust me. Tech can enable the creation of online project-based learn by doing curricula with mentoring. I'm going to say that one again. Project-based, learn by doing curricula with mentoring. Are those difficult to build? Yes, but I've been building them for 20 years, and I have a tool which you could use. I would have to teach you how to use it, and you could build them too, and you should. Let's build online learning that doesn't suck. I happened to have Thanksgiving as an American holiday last week, and I had Thanksgiving with a cousin of mine who's a dentist, and he said, I just took an online learning course. He's like 80 years old. I said, why? He says, it's required if I want to keep on being a dentist. I said, well, was it require you to read a lot of words and press A, B, C, and D? He said, yeah, that was it. Right. Okay, now let's talk about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is what I have done for a living. That is, I did that until about 1986. Why did I stop? Because we encountered AI winter. AI winter meant no more money for you guys. Why? Over-promising. People saying, we can do this, we can do that. And what you're seeing today is exactly the same thing happening again. Lies, lies, and more lies about artificial intelligence. And, luckily, I'm going to go back into it, because now there's money. So maybe I can do something useful, instead of the nonsense that's there now. Here is an advertisement that played, any American has seen it, because it played constantly, from IBM. Your non-Americans have probably not seen it.
Bob Dylan, to improve my language skills, I've read all your lyrics.
You've read all of my lyrics.
I can read 800 million pages per second.
That's fast.
My analysis shows your major themes are that time passes and love fades.
Well, that sounds about right.
No, it doesn't sound about right. I was just hearing a Bob Dylan song yesterday, which was everybody must get stoned. I don't think that was about love fades. And if Watson is sitting there counting every word in a Bob Dylan song, that doesn't mean Watson understood a single thing about Bob Dylan, who was, after all, a protest singer, and didn't pick that part up at all, because he wouldn't have understood what a protest was, because he didn't maybe ever use the word protest. And he doesn't know Watson doesn't know what the social conditions were in the 60s. And this is such nonsense, it's hard for me to believe that IBM keeps advertising it. It's the most fraudulent thing any major corporation has ever done. Here's another example of their fraud. It won Jeopardy. Have you heard that? Watson won Jeopardy.
Olympic oddities for 1,000.
It was the anatomical oddity of U.S. gymnast George Iser who won a gold medal on the parallel bars in 1904. Ken?
He only had one hand.
No. Watson?
What is leg?
No. Brad? What is he's missing a leg? Ken, you select again.
What is leg, says Watson. Now, this is all they were doing. Watson was cheating because Watson had Google. The other two did not have Google. When you can Google this particular guy they were asking about, what you see up there is that he had one flesh and blood leg, the other was amputated below the knee. Any human being can read that and understand it and say, wow. And Watson went through that paragraph looking for a body part and found the word leg and said, what is leg? In other words, Watson is stupider than any human being on the planet. It's not that we have to be worried about AI, we have to be worried about stupid AI. Real AI, let's talk about real AI. It models human intelligence. If Andrew Ning thinks that we've got it all, what? He's actually a professor somewhere?
Stanford.
That's why I left Stanford. Models human intelligence. The first thing is we have an existence proof. There are some smart people out there. Every one of you is smarter than Watson. We only see what it is that you do, okay? Here's some things I know humans can do. They can get reminded of what they want to say. You're in a conversation, you have no intention of saying anything, someone says X to you. This happened to me this morning. Someone told me their laptop was stolen. It was reminding me of the time my laptop was stolen. I had a story to tell about it. They tell stories that illustrate the point. When you get reminded, you have a story you want to tell. And if somebody keeps talking at you, you keep holding in the story. You don't even listen to them anymore because you have a story you want to tell. We can decide to be funny. Gee, us computers are just so funny. Or emotional. She just tweeted a nasty thing at me during this thing. I didn't take it personally. She was being funny and emotional. It's okay. You can get annoyed and argumentative. We've been having fun with each other because I'm from Brooklyn, really. She moved to Brooklyn, and now she thinks she's from Brooklyn. I left Brooklyn when I was 16. I had enough of it, but it's now very hip and in, and so us Brooklyn people know how to fight. And you can convince somebody of something, which is what you actually do when you're an intelligent person. You have an argument. You try to make a point of view. And as you might imagine, since I worked for Mr. Trump, I have a point of view of Mr. Trump. I'm not going to be busy telling you what it is, but all this, we're all going to die because Trump was elected is starting to piss me off. And we can help someone figure something out. I want to show you what real humans look like, and again, I'm going to go to a TV show. And in this TV show, you may not have seen it, it's a very stupid American television show. And what it is they poll 100 people and ask their opinions on certain things, and then there are two families that fight with each other as to who can guess what the polls numbers said. The question that's being asked here is, what might you hide in a freezer? And although I'm not showing that part, one of the first answers was a human body or maybe your lover's head. And I found that rather amusing because I was thinking, well, certainly Watson couldn't have figured that one out. But second, how does a human figure that one out? The only way is since they typically don't have that experience, is thinking about a movie where they may have seen something like that. And people can go through their past experiences, which include, say, movies. Here's the show.
Rod, you only got one strike. Name something someone might hide in their freezer.
Steve, I'm gonna go with a little bit of that little ganja weed. And a little dope, a little marijuana. Let's get high with it. Get out.
Weed.
This is the answer I want you to see.
I know you got one. I know. Speak.
Well, if you got drugs and you got booze,
see the thought process.
You got to have something to protect yourself when somebody comes to take it. So I'm going to say a weapon. Boom! Boom!
Okay. That's the kind of reasoning, which is not brilliant reasoning. Computers are nowhere near be able to do that. Now, mentoring is important, so I filmed some real mentoring. This is a glass artist mentoring a student.
Look.
But then I got opening here.
Yeah, why do you have opening?
Because I have the curve.
Yeah, remember I told you ground out your curve. You had a curve, but you ground...
That's what education looks like, folks, when it's done properly. So the role of AI in online education, just-in-time reminding, automated mentoring, critiques from observation, starting a conversation, and what we call direct memory access parsing, which I will explain in a minute. This all depends on having built a project-based learn-by-doing course in the first place. What do I mean by that? I mean, we can do an online AI mentor if we know exactly what you're trying to learn and exactly where you are. How? Let's imagine what questions he might say. Who is he? We don't know. But he's going to say something like, this food is cold. This food sucks. Why was it so long in getting here? He's not going to say, what do you think about the weather in Berlin in December? All right? So we don't have to try to figure out how to parse that. We can anticipate what people are about to say. And anticipating that works lots of ways. Here's a Java course we have, which is you learn by doing. And students have problems. She's working on Java 1, Task 2, Step 2. And in that runs into a coding problem. And she gets a compiler editor error. So she asks for help. What knowledge of AI knowledge do we have? Well, we know what programming steps she's doing. We know the problems that occur. We know what kinds of requests occur. I'll explain that just more simply. John went to a restaurant. He ordered a hamburger. He paid the check and left. What did he eat? No answers? You can't imagine? We make assumptions, folks, based upon background knowledge of situations. Did he use a knife and fork? Because we understand the world, okay? I invented something called the restaurant script in 1975. This is really old work to help solve that problem. And then direct memory access parsing in 1986 so that we can anticipate the questions and parse into them, knowing where you were in the situation. So therefore, our AI mentor looks at this, comes up with a set of knowledge it knows about the domain, anticipates what question might be asked, understands the goals, plans, and expectation failures that the student has them represented inside memory, and can actually understand that the goal is to make a compiler code work, and the error is in source code, and the student is in Java task 1, and its program isn't responding as the question, and then there's the
most common errors you get as a Java programmer is no suitable method found. And this drives you crazy because you can see the method in your code.
Well, he's not normally that nasal. We have 1,000 of his answers. He's been teaching the course for 20 years. He's been asked the same questions for 20 years. So all we have to do is find the right answer and match it. If we don't do that, then we can find him live and for real. Okay? There's no harm in that. This is just a way of getting, which is what we do most of the time, but we're trying to get more students now. Why are we trying to get more students? Because the Pentagon, in its wisdom, has decided I'm the only person they can rely on to build a cyber attack and security course. They're very worried about cyber attack and cyber defense. They want to teach the United States Army to do cyber attack. Enough with missile attack, cyber attack. They signed me on, and then this is the first story we created. We are building this as we speak. Okay? And I just want to talk to you about the fact that if you're going to they came to me for a reason. If you're trying to create a bunch of people who know how to do something, you don't go to the school system and say, let's give them a lot of facts and have them pass a test. That's not going to make a cyber hacker. This is what cyber hackers actually sound like.
Yes, I believe a novice off the street can be very good at this. More than anything, what you need is inspiration and a drive.
We're teaching novices off the street. So we tell you your supervisor has informed you that there's a criminal hacker organization indicated and you've forced to assist the government. You're asked to join their group.
Yeah, I think one thing that I find a lot is people think, I'm going to get a computer science degree, I'm going to be a programmer. And that was never, I don't consider myself a programmer. I write very little code.
This is what the hackers look like, by the way. They're always dressed in black. They're weird. And now I own one. One of those guys, that one, is on my payroll full time because we are invested in doing this. And the reason we're doing the AI mentoring is that the Pentagon wants to train 10,000 soldiers all at once. Well, we don't have enough mentors to do 10,000. So we will actually have to create the automated mentor, and we're doing that too. Here's another one of these guys.
One of the biggest problems the industry faces right now is phishing and spear phishing specifically. It's really easy to do. The people crafting the emails in the phishing attacks are getting better and better, and it's made it...
Anyway, those are the hackers. We're trying to become expert on this. So here's my summary. Teach people to do things. We can build thousands of those things. Not always English, history, and mathematics. And give kid choices. What excites you? What would you like to be? You know, when they polled people in the UK what they wanted to be, number one was fireman. Okay, let's build the fireman curriculum. What would be wrong with that? You could learn about physics. You could learn about how to communicate. You learn how to manage people. I don't care. Go be a fireman for a while. Zookeeper was number 2. Zookeeper. Okay, we're not having a zookeeper shortage, but I can learn about how animals work, how the general public works, how business works. There is nothing wrong with teaching these things. When they polled people in New York City, they got exactly the same answers they got in the UK. So why can't we get kids do what they feel like doing instead of ramming facts about algebra down their throats?
So we need to start building meaningful, impactful learning experiences. Now, I told you at one point in my life I worked for Donald Trump, and last 2-3 months ago, Donald Trump's campaign manager called me and said, could you build the educational platform for Donald Trump to run on? That guy was fired about 3 weeks later. So what I'm about to show you is my education platform that Donald Trump almost certainly never read. Get rid of the Common Core. That's something we have in the United States, which is every single student must be on the same page, learning every single thing. This was forced down our throats by Bill Gates, who apparently is the education expert of America, or else paid everybody off, and by the testing companies, who just love to know that they can give the same test again and again in every state. Allow students to follow their own interests. Why is testing so evil? Because it tells you what you must teach. What if I don't want to do that? What if I want to build a bridge? Well, you can't get to build a bridge, kid, because you don't have the bridge building curriculum. Why the hell not? As an example, I run around the United States and I ask questions. So I was in the Santa Fe Indian School, and I said, what curriculum would you like us to build for you? And they said, casino management. Now, as a non-American, you may not know, but Indians are allowed to run casinos because it's not officially U.S. land. Because they don't want to import other people in, they want to run their own casinos. Should we build a casino management curriculum? Yes. Should we make everyone take it? No. But can you learn a lot of stuff in a casino management curriculum? Well, yeah, it's a business, and it's also managing people, and it's also trying to deal with 100,000 issues that are really common to everyday life. What's wrong with building that? Because nobody wants to do it because we're too damn busy teaching algebra. So build 500 new online curricula. How much would that cost? $500 million. That sounds like a lot of money. No. The amount of money spent on grading the standardized tests in the state of Florida that I live in is $300 million a year. Throw those goddamn tests out and build something new. Eliminate federal control of education. Donald Trump says he wants to blow up the Department of Education. He's absolutely right. Why? Because each state will not do what every other state does. And you can do what you want. You should do what you want. One of the reasons I hate PISA is it's not only, it's like the Department of Education. It's trying to control that every country has to teach exactly the same stuff. I was invited to Bogota, Colombia, and they had just failed the PISA test. They came in 65th or something, and they had a national conference, and I was there to speak. And what can we do about this? At the same moment, the World Cup was going on. And I said, you think this is the World Cup and you just lost the World Cup of testing? Forget it. The tests are meaningless. Think about what jobs you might have, what jobs you might want to create, what cultural problems you have in your society. And don't let somebody off in OECD tell you what you must teach. I only have one last sentence and you're looking at it.
Careful, I've got Donald Trump on the phone.
He's not against what I'm saying.
He's offering you education secretary.
A lot of people have suggested that, but
You've got 30 seconds,
I'm
Roger,
not a politician. The last one, and this is what I would actually tell Mr. Trump if he asks. Take every Ivy League college president, bring them into Washington, and tell them that if they don't change their admission requirements, no more SAT tests, no more telling kids what courses they have to take, we will take all the federal funding away from your school. Let's see how fast they change. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Roger, I had to do that. We've only got 16 minutes to run, and therefore I'm only going to give you one question because you overran by about 5 minutes. Is there a virtue in learning by heart? Does it and others shape our brain in younger days, or can we Google everything? From Martin Riemer.
There's no value in memorizing things except for you want to learn the lyrics to a song. In fact, it's easy to memorize songs because you hear them again and again and again. There's no value in memorizing whatsoever. That's not because of Google. That's because what you memorize is just static stuff. What happens in real life is whatever we know changes with every interaction. Every single person here is going to be different when they leave. Maybe only this much different, but suddenly they're thinking thoughts. And one of the reasons I don't believe in lectures is that there's not a person in this room who hasn't had a reaction to what I've said. And they didn't get to say it. So they have two choices. One, continue to think about their reaction and therefore ignore me while I'm talking, or ignore their own thoughts. Neither are a good idea.
Another comment here. Okay, no tests anymore. Everyone will become firemen. How can you graduate?
You know who there's only one government organization that understands? It's the Motor Vehicle Bureau. It's called that in the States, and every other country has it, but they have some different name for it. It's the one that gives out driver's licenses.